Hello everyone, and welcome back for another video here on my YouTube channel. This is Cassie. Today we're going to be making lots of cards with the Pink and Main February kit called Dragonfly Dreams, and as of filming it's still available, so I'll have the link down below. But before we get started on any cards, I wanted to show you a little technique. I was looking at that tissue paper that came in the kit and I was like, we can do something with this. So I'm going to grab out a glue stick. Glue stick is best. You could use liquid glue, but you'd really have to make it nice and thin. And I'm going to crumple up my tissue paper that came in the kit and just stick that down onto a piece of 5.5 by 8.5 inch cardstock. I just went ahead and cut down one of the panels that were in the kit. And I'm just going to make sure this is glued on all the edges. Just using that glue stick. I like the crumply effect. And then I'm going to trim this down. The reason I'm doing this is because I noticed this tissue paper matches the kit perfectly. So I'll show you something you can do. Waste not, want not, even the tissue paper can be used on your cards. Now I'm going to die cut this. I've got some stitched squares that I have. I'll run that through my die cutting machine, and then I'm going to pull out the embossing folder and we're going to emboss these. And with the texture that's already on there, you know, just follow the directions on your machine and check that out. Is that not super cool? I love the tissue paper, like the texture with that, but then you add that embossing folder on top of it, and now we can make our first card. So let's jump into it. I have a card base. This was 5.5 by 8.5 inches, so basically the other half of that white cardstock that I used. Scored it at 4.25 inches, and now I'm just kind of figuring out what I want to do. I trimmed down some pattern paper. I decide I'm going to ink up my dragonflies, a few of them, just using some ink. And this ink that I'm using is the Rosy Cheeks ink by Simon Hurley Create. This ink is amazing because not only is it good for all those other techniques that I show you all the time, you can Copic color or alcohol marker color right over the top of this ink. And oh wow, talk about a really cool effect. So it is so fun to stamp using different colors and then use your alcohol inks to color those images in. You don't have to just use boring black all the time. You can use other colors. And so all of the Simon Hurley Create inks are formulated to be able to Copic color over the top of them. Ha! Isn't that cool? All right, so I'm just going to use various colors that I found that matched the color palette that was brought into this kit, and I'll just fill that in, and then I'm going to bring in the matching dies that came with this kit, and we'll run this through our die cutting machine, and then I'll have these 3 little dragonflies all ready to go. And now we'll start putting placement over our card. So this is going to be an A2 size card. This card front that I have cut down is 4.25 by 5.5 inches, and I'm just placing my squares on there. Again, love all the texture that comes on this, so play around with your tissue paper. Imagine the possibilities that you could have. Crumpling it up even more and adding even more texture, running it through with different embossing folders. It's just super fun. Maybe I'll just do a whole video on that. Wouldn't that be fun? Ooh, it's a cool technique. All right, now I'm going to pop down my dragonflies on top of those squares. With that big one, I decide I'm going to use some foam tape on the back of him. I really want him nice and popped up since he's got those beautiful flowers on one of his wings. And then we'll just peel off all that release paper and pop that dragonfly down. And then for our sentiment, I'm going to stamp that on some of the pink cardstock that came in the kit. I'll use some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. It's a nice dark pigment black ink, very crisp. We'll trim this down, and then I'll put one foam dot on the back of it, line it up on my glass mat, and we'll stick that down, and then I'll trim off that excess, and this will be ready to be attached to the front of our A2 size card, and I'm just going to use a little liquid glue for that as well. And that will fit the full front there. I do decide I want to do some stuff on the inside of these cards, so I'm going to take that dragonfly and we'll ink it up again with the Rosy Cheeks and stamp that down on the inside. And so then we have some outside-inside action going on. I'm going to bring in the enamel dots. I'm going to do that for pretty much all the cards, almost all of the cards. I'm going to use these enamel dots, and I'll still have lots left over. But I've grabbed the yellow ones this time, and we'll pop those down where I think those are going to look good. Just using those variously all over. I love how the enamel dots, you know, they just add a little something, and then that pop of yellow on there is super fun, especially with the yellow flowers that I did. So there's card number 1. So happy with how that turned out. I'm actually not finished with it, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. You can see it here in the picture. I did add something to it, and we'll show you in this card. So the second card I'm going to make is a slimline card. So my card base is cut down to 7 inches by 8.5 inches, scoring that at 3.5 inches. So that is going to be our slimline. This is the yellow cardstock that came in the kit, and you can see I already have some pattern paper cut down. I cut this down to 3 inches by 6 inches, so basically just cut that pattern paper right in half. I'm going to glue this down on the front on that far right-hand side, and yes, there is going to be a seam, but we're going to trick the eye, so don't worry about it. This is just a fun way that you can make those 6x6 pattern papers work on those slimline cards that we all love to make. So I'm putting that down. I'll cut that off later, and yes, there's clearly a seam there because that doesn't even match up, but it's all right. We'll play with it. And then I have this piece cut down, and we're going to line that up on that far right-hand side again, and then do that again with this little strip of paper. I'm really loving the darker patterns with those lighter pieces all over it to decorate. It's so pretty, so pretty. So now I'm going to bring in my guillotine trimmer, and we'll trim off all of that excess patterned paper that we have, and we can save those for another card. And then I even have to turn it on this side and trim that down just a little bit. Not much, just a hair. And then for our seam, we're going to cover that with some of the leftover paper that I had from this. We're going to use this again as well. But I'm going to trim this down. I don't want to waste any of it because it's so cool and textured. But I'm going to trim this down. And then I'm even going to cut a little angle on the one side for a little bit of interest, and that'll cover up that seam beautifully, so you won't even know it's there. It'll just look like a continuous piece of pattern paper on that full slimline card. And then we can trim that down, and then you'll see I've got some dragonflies that I already had stamped, colored, and die cut out, and now we're going to stamp out our sentiment, so I'll trim this down as well. I love those little solid dragonflies as well because it's just fun. They're like a whole nother embellishment. Think about embossing them too, how fun that could be. So I'm trimming down my sentiment. We'll attach this right underneath our little turquoise piece, and of course we'll have to trim that down eventually as well. But now we're going to glue down all of our dragonflies. These are so pretty. I just love this one with the flowers on the wings. So beautiful. And then stamping these in black, I feel like that makes them pop even more for the rest of these. And we're using our reverse tweezers. I got smart, pulled those out. Those are from a previous kit, but those are available in the store. So if you don't have a good pair of reverse tweezers, I can definitely recommend these. These are very nice. And reverse tweezers are, I feel like, a staple item you have to have in your stash. They're just so useful, especially when using small things. You know, you think your fingers are small enough to hold some of these things, and then I realize that they're not, for me anyway. All right, and then I decide I want to bring in some stamping on the inside, so I'm going to bring in those dragonflies, and we're going to use some Simon Hurley Create Slippery When Wet. It matches perfectly, and we'll just stamp all those dragonflies all over the inside, leaving plenty of room to write to our recipient. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I'm actually bringing in some Icicle Crackle paste. Now, this stuff may not be available anymore because it was seasonal, but there is Crackle glue out there, and my Crackle paste I put into this tube, and I can use it and just put it where I want. But dragonflies' wings are always that cracked look, so when this dries, and you'll see it in the final picture, it is going to be all cracked and cool. And I went ahead and did this on all of the dragonflies that I stamped out and colored. So you'll see that in all the final pictures. But take a look at that. Nice and crackled. How cool is that? All right, let's move on to our third card. Our third card is actually 4 cards in one. It's the same pattern. I'm pulling in the stencil, and I am going to just tape that down onto some of that pink cardstock. And then I'm using that Rosy Cheeks again, and I'm going to blend that all over our stencil. And then when I pull that away, we'll have these fun little dragonflies all as a background. I do apologize if you hear bells in the background. That's my boys, meaning the cats, are wrestling back here. All right, so we'll pull this stencil away, and you'll see how cool the stencil is. And then I'm going to trim this down. I'm going to trim off all of the edges of our piece. So this will make it smaller than a 6-inch panel, which is fine. And then I'm going to trim these down to about 1.25 inches each. So I'm going to have 1.25 inch strips, And I'll do that 4 times because we're going to make 4 cards. I kind of like doing this. I've learned that you can make these, you know, like a little collection of cards and then have those in your stash. I'll pull in this piece of cardstock. I'm going to cut this to 6 inches, and then I'm going to cut these down to about 2 inches. So I'll do 4 of them that are 2 inches, 2 inches by 6 inches. And then I decide to cut down this pattern paper to be just slightly smaller than the 2 inches. I'm going to make it slightly smaller than 6 inches at first, and then I'll flip it on its side, because I want to layer this on top of that turquoise or Caribbean color cardstock, so it'll have a nice little border. I line up the cut pieces, the Dragonfly stencils, and I'm going to splatter that. I love doing splatter. And we're going to splatter that with some rose gold shimmer paint. And I am very liberal with that shimmer paint. It's just another way to add some texture and make the stencil even that much more interesting. So the stencil background will be just so cool. And then I do have to let that off to the side to dry, and we'll start getting our card bases ready. So I like to use some pretty heavy 12 by 12 cardstock to make my mini slimline. So yes, that's what these are going to be. So I cut those down to 6 inches by 6 inches and score those all at 3 inches. And then we're going to start doing some assembly. And I'll just glue all of these pieces down together. I make sure and get all of those glued. All 4 of them are glued and ready, and then we can start doing our assembly. So these are nice and dry. I'm going to glue these down first. The pink pieces at the top, we'll leave a nice little border on the sides and on the top of our dragonflies. And then we'll attach these pieces down. These are going to go right to the very bottom of our cardstock. So those will layer up there nicely. And then I get all of them made, all 4 of them, and then we're going to stamp on our sentiment. And this sentiment I just thought was really sweet. Could send out a bunch of fun little cards that say, "Thoughts of you fill my days with joy." Isn't that a nice sentiment? And then we'll trim all of those down, and then we can attach those down to the front of our little cards as well, just using a little bit more liquid glue. And we'll do that with all of them, lining that up on my glass mat. I thought about using some of the enamel dots, but I changed my mind. But there you have it. There is card number 3, 4 cards for card number 3. And I really like how those turned out. And now we'll move on to card number 4. Card number 4 is going to be a full front shaker. I don't know why. I mean, I've done this with vellum before, but I had some packaging sitting there and I thought, I'm going to make one. So what you're going to want to do is cut your packaging to be a little bit bigger than whatever your card front is going to be. Mine is an A2 size card. So I'm just lining this up into my guillotine trimmer and trimming this down. I have a piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches there. And now I'm going to cut the packaging apart. I'm leaving about 1/2 inch on the sides, and then that extra piece I can save for other things. Maybe make a smaller shaker, who knows? Who knows? But we have options. And this one will wrap around nicely. So I need to get that ready. So I'm going to trim this pattern paper down. That's going to sit on the inside. So I'm cutting this down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. So that'll leave a nice green border around our cardstock. And I'm going to cut this pattern paper out just using a circle. And now we can start assembling. So I'll glue this piece to this panel. And then that's where I'm going to bring in our packaging. Again, as I said, you want this to be a little bigger than your front. So I'm going to put some tape. This is some, not tape runner, but like a score tape. And we're going to have a nice strong adhesive on the 2 sides. I'm going to do those first. I'll peel off that release paper on both of those. And then I'm going to stick that into my packaging. And it's already creased on those sides, so it'll wrap around very, very nicely. Very serendipitous that I had a piece of packaging that fit perfectly around an A2. All right, and then to make my pocket, I have to put another piece of this cardstock, or tape, at the bottom of the cardstock. Peel off the release paper, and then we will fold that over. I do have some corners that are kind of bugging me, and so I'm just going to trim those down. Don't worry, nothing will fall out. It just kind of cuts down on the bulk. And then I have the pocket open at the top. I'm going to grab those sequins that came in the kit, but check that out. There's our pocket. I'm going to grab the sequins that came in the kit. We'll open that up, and I start pouring in the front. of our pouch. And then I realize I'm going to use all those. I just want to use all of them. I feel like this is a perfect amount. If you're going to do a full front shaker, that is the perfect amount of sequins, because, you know, it's a full front shaker. You want lots and lots of sequins in there. And this is still going to go through the mail just perfectly fine. So now let's seal that pouch up by using our tape. We just do the same thing like we did on the bottom. Peel off that release paper and fold that over. And then now we can trim down the corners a little bit to cut down on some of that bulk. And this panel is ready to be decorated. So check that out. A full shaker pouch. How fun. Just using some packaging that we all have sitting around, right? Okay, so now I'm going to take the tape and I'm going to put this on the back of my circle so we can start decorating. I'll just use 3 slices of that. Peel that off and stick that down on the front. And then I did have some cut and colored, well, not quite cut yet, but colored and stamped images all ready to go. This is going to be a birthday card. I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. And then we'll use the tape on this as well. You could use foam tape if you wanted, since this isn't super bulky, but I definitely want to keep down on the bulk because this is filled with sequins. So I'll peel off that release paper. I'm going to use a little bit of liquid glue on the bottom part of our Dragonfly since I didn't have any tape thin enough for that. And then I'll stick our Dragonfly down. He's going to be a little off center because I want that happy birthday to be right underneath his flowered wing. And then, of course, I can't stop there. I'm going to bring in that icicle again. But let's go ahead and attach this down to our card base using, again, that same tape. Line this up by sticking it straight up and down on our glass mat. And there you have it. There's where I'm going to bring in the icicle stuff again. So cool. I love it. This stuff has so many great uses. So we'll fill in those wings and then you'll see it in the end all nice and cracked. So pretty. And there you have our fun little shaker. That's our final card. But let me show you what I did with the freebie that came in the kit. I'm so excited about it. So check it out. I use it with the kit as well. Oh, so pretty. And now let's take a look at all of the cards I made for you. I would love to know which one was your favorite if you had a favorite. This kit is still available. And like I said, there is a freebie this month for becoming a subscriber. And I'll have the links down below. And if you haven't seen the unboxing, obviously you saw all the pieces, I'll have that linked down below as well. But go ahead and leave in the comment section which one was your favorite if you did have a favorite. If you liked the video, again, be sure to hit that like button and definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.